The EU Parliament President, Roberta Metsola, on tonight's programme, says EU support for Ukraine as strong as ever, and yet there's still more to do on Russia. And so here in Europe today, I sat down with President Roberta Metsola, who is the President of the European Parliament. Now, our interview was before the news of the arrest of the Wall Street Journal reporter came out. So I was unable to question on her, which is why you're not going to hear her talk about it. But on the bigger issue of Ukraine, on the wider issue, I should say, not bigger issue, on the wider issue of Ukraine, the underlying issue there, it's how the EU will continue to support Ukraine. And here, President Metsola made it clear there was no fatigue and the EU would do whatever was necessary.
It ends when Russia gets out of Ukraine. It's the same thing we said immediately on the 24th of February last year, when we all woke up to an invasion by a country into another. We have seen actually an escalation over the past a few days also with Russia planning to place a nuclear armament in Belarus. And that has meant that we as a European Union, slow to start, although we got our act together, but weapons took long to get there. Tanks have finally started to arrive. As you said, jets have started to be given. We can still go further because the escalation is one we have to respond to.
Okay, but the Parliament, being closer in a sense to the public, will start to feel that anxiety quicker than maybe the other institutions. And your MPs will start to say, hang on, where is this going? Do we want it to continue like this? Is it worth the price?
I think, the price for freedom can never be too high. And if you had asked me this 1 year ago, I would have thought that by today, that anxiety would have hit in quicker, but it hasn't. No matter how hard they have been bombed every day, the Ukrainian resilience and spirit has shown us that the freedoms that we've all taken for granted are worth fighting for.
So when you have a Hungary which won't allow weapons through its borders, it won't support in the same way. Yes, I know it hasn't blocked the various sanctions, but it hasn't gone wholeheartedly, and it's delaying, of course, Sweden to NATO. Can you, as President of the Parliament, put pressure there?
Yeah, I sit around the table of the European Council and my position, I have been mandated with most clarity that unity is essential. And of course we can look and understand how difficult package by package of sanctions has been. But we've come so far that if we think of countries that were last year 100% reliant on Russian gas, and today we're in spring, doesn't look like this outside the windows, but we're in spring. We have survived the winter. Our storages are still almost full. We have managed to uncouple ourselves, and I think that we will not fall back into where we were before, into being relying on a very intimidating big neighbor to our east.
But escalation is the fear. And Ukraine, Russia says essentially it's NATO against Russia. And the truth is that NATO is fighting this war without fighting this war.
I would say that Russia or Putin thought he could take Kiev at the time within 5 days. I think he underestimated, perhaps the world underestimated the resilience of Ukraine. We tend to forget, or sometimes we exclude it from our narrative, that this is about one country that has invaded another. Putin didn't stop in 2008. He didn't stop in Crimea. He doesn't look like he's stopping now. What should our response be? Let Ukraine alone? Or actually help logistically, militarily, financially? Should it do more? I would be the first one to say, absolutely. Are our defense capabilities, should they been better? Absolutely. Should we create a security and defense union? Absolutely. Not in competition with NATO, in complementarity with NATO. But there are countries to our east who have been telling us for years, this is going to happen. Look at Moldova. Look at what happened in Belarus. Why are there no more sanctions on Belarusian regime? Why haven't we not helped Moldova more? we should have done that earlier. And I think that if we learned something, is that looking at the transatlantic alliance, never before, at least in my lifetime, more important than it is now.
As the European Union grapples with a response to the United States' Inflation Reduction Act, the President of the EU Parliament says green subsidies are all fair and good, but wants to avoid a race to the bottom. However, Europe must respond, and as she told me, the pressure is now ratcheting up to react to the IRA before the US takes the lion's share of business. I asked President Roberta Metsola what the EU is actually doing to tackle the inflation crisis.
Our economy is based on small and medium-sized enterprises. How are we going to help them? And there, together with the rise of interest rates, in order to curb inflation, we're going to have to help them sector by sector, country by country.
You've just said we're going to have to help them. Now, does that mean at national government level? Does that mean at European level? Because the central European level has moved into areas that it was not in before. I'm thinking, of course, of mutualisation of debt in some cases. What does that mean, helping? Does that mean picking and choosing sectors for central help?
This is actually quite a dominant discussion, in fact, when you see prime ministers next to each other arguing, listen, I need help here, or I need help here. The Recovery and Resilience Facility, which we voted on in this House together with the Commission and the Council, was aimed at what we call the digital and green transition for all economies, irrespective of which country, to become, I would say, more equal, to create a more level playing field, not to make them the same, but if you look at the investment by certain countries in sectors, that should be encouraged. If we look at some countries that still require a lot of help, let's bring them up to where the countries that have invested in the past could go. So let's talk about investment in renewables, let's talk about sectors where we are very competitive as European Union, but also let's talk about those sectors that are concerned about the emergence of China, the Inflation Reduction Act.
The IRA is a really good example of how a federal system works, with a central core that comes in with a policy that everybody seems to say, gosh, this is rather good. This is exactly what's needed. Europe comes along with its net zero this and it's this policy that, and a sort of a half-hearted attempt because it's all by consensus. And everybody agrees, yes, the Commission's come up with something, but it's not quite the IRA.
You're saying that, not me. But what I will tell you
is that it's not. I mean, more needs to be done on the European side.
No, I think the way, first of all, our transatlantic alliance has not been this good since the fall of the wall. I can say this. And I say this because when we look at the IRA being a fundamentally, piece of legislation that aims to make the US greener, aims to make the US competitive, aims to make the US more protective of its sectors, how do we react? Do we go, Fortress Europe, don't touch our products? Do we go, let's continue to rely on unreliable partners for importation of critical raw materials and rare earths? Or do we say, let's see where we're competitive, let's make an agreement with the United States, which we are on track in terms of what was signed already. When we look at the Net Zero Industry Act, it's not by consensus, it's by a proper legislative process inside this House, in order to look at where we can, let's not say protect, but help our industry survive.
Right, but I'm going to ask the question again. The view in Europe is, or from those business leaders I've spoken to, yes, something has been done, but Europe has not yet come up with the killer app like the IRA.
Okay, I take that, and I put it on ourselves in order for us to make sure that we alleviate the impact that we will have without going down a protectionist subsidy road to the bottom race. And I think that's where the conversation we need to have with our industry leaders.
So, finally, how much is it for an MEP? I mean, the Qatar and the...
For an MEP.
I'm being facetious here on a very serious issue. First of all, do you believe Qatar did bribe And secondly, how are you going to prevent it? Because this is the sort of thing that if you do not show teeth, you may as well turn the lights off.
I can tell you that this has been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. You know, the instinct could have been actually criminal corruption is as old as politics. There will always be somebody who's willing to pay and always be someone who's willing to take payment for anything, right? This is life. But I took a decision on that day that for the protection of this institution, for the integrity of the European Union, keeping in mind the fact that these are allegations, presumption of innocence, etc., we cannot allow a house like this to be as vulnerable. Now, does that mean close it up? Of course not. We pride ourselves on our openness. But that has meant that we put in, and we're rolling them out month by month, 15 immediate measures, a little bit more long-term, some coming after. We've put in a revolving door for MEPs. We've made sure that we keep tabs on who comes in and comes out, declaration of meetings, who are you talking to, preserving your mandate as a freely elected member of the European Parliament, but at the end of the day, making sure that if the alarm bells, and I take this as my responsibility, did not ring early enough, next time, I hope they will.
Were you shocked when it happened?
I was shocked. It was like someone punched me in the gut.
Really?
Winded, I would say, yeah.